first and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone who has chosen to come and spend a little bit of time with us. We've got now, looks like about 25 minutes or so that we're going to spend together. And so my hope is that we have kind of an open, honest dialogue. Two things that I would tell you in just in terms of core logistics, my hope is really that we get a little bit of Q&A going. And so I do not believe that I have any monopoly on truth and would love to hear your voices. So I would invite you all either now or later to come off of mute, ask any questions. I'd also invite you to turn on your cameras. I'd love just to kind of see who y'all are and engage like we were in person together. I do miss the togetherness that I think we all have missed since the spring of 2020, and I know we're getting close to being able to replicate it again. So it's great to be with you, and we'll jump into this. So first, why don't I start by introducing myself? My name is Germaine Hunter. I wear two hats here at Marathon Petroleum. First, I lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion practice, and I also lead our talent acquisition team. I've been here at Marathon for about a year. Prior to that, I spent about 20 years in the consumer packaged goods space across a variety of operations roles, both in the commercial groups and in operations. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you. I think the connection points we all make with Diversity MBA are amongst some of the most valuable relationships that I've developed in my time working in this space, and I hope that that's true for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience in the energy space, and by extension, some of the things that I've learned in this space. I'm also going to talk about a specific step that we've taken to try to advance our inclusion, equity, and diversity journey. And hopefully that stimulates some thoughts, some questions for me, but also some dialogue and discussion that we can have amongst ourselves. If you're not already familiar with it, make sure that you're taking every opportunity to use the chat. We'll continue to kind of monitor the chat. But again, there'll be plenty of opportunities to bring yourselves off of chat and to actually ask questions out loud. So I'm going to start by providing just a little bit of background and context for the situation that I've encountered as I've entered Marathon Petroleum, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've done. Like so many companies, when I came to MPC, I found that we were at the very earliest stages of our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, and quite candidly, some of the conversations that are very easy and familiar for probably so many folks who are on the call today were not necessarily part of our everyday language. They weren't part of what we talked about day in and day out. And so in the midst of doing a lot of the things that any new chief diversity officer does when they enter a corporation, I also decided very early on that we were going to spend a little bit of time trying to facilitate some richer, deeper conversations, that we were going to actually try to not only engage people both at the head level, but also at the heart level. And we were going to try to engage people in a way and role model within my team, and by extension within our larger HR organization. We wanted to role model some of the behaviors that we were asking people to exhibit in the course of their lives and in the course of their work. Now, I would tell you at the outset as well that I do not consider myself to necessarily be a leadership expert, but I am certainly a practitioner and someone who's made a lot of mistakes, and I've had the good fortune, really, of being able to find myself in a role where I could reflect on those mistakes and then share those mistakes with others. So to this end, to the end of trying to start a different conversation and different dialogue, one of the things that I did very early on was start a speaker series where I was reaching out to different parts of the organization to share thoughts and ideas around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But because we were so early on in our journey, and because so many of these concepts have been less familiar to our population, I wanted to take a slightly less traditional route. I wanted to start talking about things that would feel more accessible to an audience and a population of folks who are not accustomed to having a lot of these types of conversations around DE&I. And so what I decided that I would focus my thoughts around as I was engaging with and talking to different parts of the organization was three things. I first wanted to start by talking to people about how to value the uniqueness in every individual. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we think about leveraging those unique characteristics in all of the folks who work throughout MPC? The second thing that I wanted to talk to leaders specifically about was the importance of self-awareness. Why do we need to make intentional efforts to build a large tent, to bring lots of people in under the fold, to reach out to different parts of our community that sometimes might be marginalized or whose voices might not be heard, in order to make sure that we are elevating as many ideas and thoughts and concepts as we possibly can. And then the third thing that I started talking to people about, which was a little bit of a head scratcher and a little bit unique, was this idea of self-care. How do we help encourage people and leaders to think about their own role in bringing about change in an organization and the things that they need to do to care for and preserve their own stores of energy, so that when they find themselves in those moments when we're trying to advance inclusion, when we're trying to do things that are outside of the daily grind of just delivering against our operational goals, that people would be in a position to do it. They would have the energy to do it. They would have the capacity to do those things. And so that was very much my thought on how we might begin to drive some different conversations in a company, and candidly, I would even argue in an industry where those types of conversations don't happen a lot. So then the question became, how do we do that? How do we help the organization? How do we help leaders in the organization begin to build this muscle, both individually and to build the muscle at a collective or a group level? Well, I'm sure there's lots of different ways that we could have gone about that work, but the one that I chose to go very deep on is this idea of storytelling. And I know lots of you may be familiar with kind of the emerging theme of storytelling. For me, it kind of dated back. It was actually an article that I read in Forbes magazine a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic. It was early 2019. And it talked about the importance of telling stories in business contexts, right? In fact, there's a quote from the article that I actually keep here in my office that I think really speaks to it, as well as anything else. And then the author of the article noted the most successful people and companies have profound stories behind them that instill a bigger purpose and meaning into what they do. And so, as I have been engaging different portions of our organization in conversation and dialogue, trying to build these authentic moments for people to kind of expand their own experiences, I've used this doorway of storytelling as a way to help people begin to practice, leaders particularly, begin to practice this skill of engaging with others in the organization in ways that we know will help enhance our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. You know, I personally have for some time been a pretty deep believer in this idea that as leaders, as individuals, we all become more influential, and frankly, we experience more growth, both personally and professionally, when we share our stories. And maybe one of the things that I have found that has resonated most strongly with different audiences when I take this message to them is this notion that every person has a remarkable story in some form or fashion, that every one of our stories is remarkable, if for no other reason than that it is ours, it is unique to us, and that it is born out of our own life experiences. And so, I would tell you that this approach, while we are still very much mid-flight and we are still going through it, has been well received. It's allowed us to talk about DE&I with people who typically wouldn't be on this particular bandwagon, and who quite candidly look at all of this work with a little bit of a jaundiced eye. And I would say the larger lesson that I have taken from the experience and the approach thus far is around the importance of finding multiple avenues to connect with organizations and people within our organization who might feel threatened by the efforts we're making, and I would argue most organizations are making, around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think this approach that we have formed and are in the process of executing has really opened a new gateway, and I'm quite candidly pretty excited about the results that we're seeing. The next phase of this work really looks like building a constellation, if you will, of folks who can start driving these types of conversations even more broadly to further out geographies, to parts of our business that are further afield from our headquarter locations here in Texas or in Ohio. And while there are lots of different elements to our DE&I strategy that we'll look to activate against, I think as we move forward, this idea of continuing to leverage storytelling as a mechanism to drive authentic conversation will be foundational. And I think that we'll continue to infuse it into everything that we're doing and to all of the different aspects of our work that we're pursuing, whether it's diverse hiring, community engagement and connection, trying to reshape culture across different parts of our organization. So I'm looking at the clock, and I want to make sure that I'm being mindful of time, and also being mindful that we're creating an opportunity for discussion and dialogue and space. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to ask first if folks have any questions, and if we got some brave people who want to come off of mute and ask a question, I'd love to hear your voices. Or if you're more comfortable doing it, feel free to put something in the chat and we can go from there.
Hi, Germaine, this is Denise Farmer. How are you today?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. So I was just wondering I guess for me, I don't always feel like we've got quite the involvement from the leaders in DE&I and our ERGs as we needed. So do you have ERGs, and how did you get like the 7th floor, as we call them? I think some people call them the C-suite, but how do you get them more engaged?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts that I would tell you, and again, I do not even want to remotely put off the impression that I have got this all figured out, because we're still working through it. But a couple of things that I would offer. One, yes, we do have ERGs. We call them employee networks here at Marathon. We've got 7 of them, aligned to most of the traditional affinity groups that you would expect folks to have, employee resource groups in support of. And our most recent one, the 7th that we just added, is a disability employee resource group. So we are going down that path. I think a couple of things that I have learned about executive support, and it's pretty consistent with what I was talking about before. One is, yes, you do have to have some type of structural process in place to engage your C-suite or your senior most leaders. For us, we are in the process of developing an executive council or diversity council, which would be comprised of several members of that group. There are different ways, though, that my previous organization, we just always had DE&I on the executive leadership team agenda, right? So there's multiple ways to do it. But the bigger breakthrough, I would tell you, comes in creating opportunities and platforms for each of those senior leaders to connect with some aspect of the work that matters most to them. So, as an example, one of our executive committee members or executive leadership team members had a brother who was gay and passed away a number of years ago. He became the advocate for our LGBTQ plus resource group, despite the fact that he himself is not gay. And as he got more engaged in the work of that group, he got more engaged in the work of our entire DE&I agenda. And I could go down the line with different levels of connection that individuals have had to something that resonates in their own lives. And so, I think we can get so focused on frameworks and strategies and action plans and goal setting exercises that we can lose sight of the importance of really, in this work particularly, leveraging those individual passion points amongst senior most leaders in order to try to help us make progress. Great question. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Other questions, thoughts? Anybody else? See, a couple of you have come off of mute, but I didn't know if you had something you wanted to share or ask.
Hi, this is George Hamilton. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, George.
Excellent. Thank you, Germaine. So I truly enjoy hearing the use of storytelling as the mechanism to drive that conversation. Now, what were some of the challenges that we should be aware as we embark in the same path, right? So, because I see that, you mentioned that, yeah, you were able to go ahead and reach out to people that otherwise didn't feel comfortable, right? Or they didn't feel like they have, a voice in a situation like this. But how can you, help them get more engaged and get the best out of those people,
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I would say the first and maybe the most important thing is recognizing that a lot of folks actually don't know how to do this. It sounds so simple, right? Tell stories. But the practical reality is that most people don't get a lot of experience and practice doing that. Some are very uncomfortable and others, frankly, just don't know how. And so as I and my diversity, equity, and inclusion team have been talking about this work, and this applies both in my current organization and the past, we've actually helped facilitate these authentic moments by providing leaders with some guidance on what storytelling looks like. How do you leverage it? I leveraged a 2019 Forbes article earlier, a couple minutes ago, and that's one of the pieces of information that I have proactively shared with leaders in the organization as not only a demonstration of the importance of storytelling as a mechanism, as a vehicle, but also in terms of providing some guidance on how to do it best and how to be most authentic. So that's the first thing that I would say, George. The second thing that I would say is that it's important to be intentional. So we've found that you have to create moments, whether they're in small groups of employees or larger forums, for those stories to be shared with others and for that information to resonate. And going back to Denise's question, that's a great way to engage senior most leaders, because if we're not communicating about our DE&I agenda on a regular, consistent basis, and then weaving in personal narratives to bring those strategic visions to life, my experience is it's really hard to get traction. Really, really hard to get traction. Good question. Thank you so much,
Awesome.
George.
Thank you, Germaine.
Yeah.
Hi, George, or Germaine.
Hey.
And George.
Hi,
George,
hi.
too.
We'll work together. So great to see you.
Good to see you, too. I have a question. Thank you, Germaine, for sharing your thoughts. I don't know how to word this in the right way, or I'm looking towards you, Germaine, or anyone on the call. You've called out inclusion and diversity as an agenda topic. Has anyone, we're still on the journey, and I feel good about the journey that we're going on as a company, but it's always called out as an agenda topic or a project. And I feel like it's embedded in what I do day in and day out. Has anyone or any company gone past, making it an agenda topic and just, not calling it out specifically? I know we're intentional in what we do, but at the same time, it's weaved out. I don't know if I'm making sense.
I think,
but it's not a project. It's not it's what we do. It's the right
I've got thoughts, but I'm going to be silent for a second and see if anybody else wants to respond before I kind of share my thoughts. If anybody on the call has a point of view, love to hear it.
Please.
So I'll tell you, while folks are mustering their courage, I'll kind of share with you just some perspectives from my vantage point. Because I think you're right. I think we're all aspiring to get to like integration. Like that is the goal. But for me, I think knowing that that's the end state makes it easier for me to be intentional about the steps along the way. So I, as the kind of enterprise leader of our DE&I work, I want the topic to always be on senior leadership agendas. I want to make sure that twice a year we're having the conversation with our board explicitly about what we're doing around DE&I. The integration comes in how we're actually activating the strategy. So we've identified the places in the employee life experience where we want to infuse capability, thinking, practices that help us move further along on our journey. Because you're right, Mary, I think the goal is to get so good that we don't have to think about it explicitly. But for me, it's a balance between how do we help employees build skills that take us to that end state, while at the same time making sure leaders always have it at the front of their mind. But that's my approach. Great question, though.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I again want to be respectful of everyone's time because I know you're going to have another session to get to. Any last thoughts? I think we probably have time for one, maybe two more, but probably just one.
Hey, Germaine, this is George again. Sorry to take more time,
George.
But I think just to add additional, an additional thought, right, to what you said, I think it's very important to also keep those managers or hold them accountable, right? Not only have them be part of the goal, but also hold them accountable, just like you said, not only the managers, but also the ERG leaders, right?
Yeah. Yep. Great observation, Rod. No, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail right on the head. So I think that's fantastic. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we can probably turn folks loose to your next session about a minute or so early. But thank you so much. Sorry, was there someone saying something? Okay. I'll just say it's always a pleasure. It's a pleasure being with fellow practitioners, folks who are just interested in the space, people who are learning and growing in their own careers. One of the things that I love about working in the diversity space is that there is no competition. We're all just trying to get a little bit better. So to the extent that it's helpful, if ever it is helpful, I hope everyone will feel free to reach out to me as a resource. I'm here, and love nothing more than just connecting with people and figuring out where and how we can work together to move our common cause ahead. So thanks for this time, and enjoy the rest of the Diversity MBA conference.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.